It was 3 in the morning when my daughter appeared at my bedroom door, holding a small statue of the Virgin Mary that I had smashed with my own hands 2 years prior. It was intact, as if it had never been touched by the hammer I wielded with such conviction back then. "Daddy," she whispered, "I dreamt of a lady who told me to give you this." My heart pounded, my hands trembled, and in that moment I knew my life would never be the same. Let me go back to the beginning, because this story needs to be told from the start. My name is Andrew. I'm 42, and for a long time I considered myself a soldier of Christ. I was born into a Pentecostal evangelical family, raised believing that images were an abomination in God's eyes, that Catholics were misguided, that our mission was to break the idols of the modern world. At 25, I took over the pastorate of a small church in the town of Havenwood, a rural area of the South, inheriting not only the pulpit but also the uncompromising fervor of my mentor, Pastor Elijah. Pastor Elijah was a 60-year-old man, thin as a rail, with eyes that seemed to burn when he spoke of the war against idolatry. He taught me that our mission wasn't just to preach on Sundays, but to take concrete action against what he called the blasphemies scattered throughout the streets. He was the one who gave me the hammer. An ordinary carpenter's hammer, its wooden handle worn from use. On the side, he had branded with a hot iron, "Christ alone." "This is your instrument of liberation," he said the day he passed on the church leadership to me. "Use it to break the shackles that bind souls to deception." But what struck me most were the reactions of the people. When they woke up and found their images destroyed, the despair in their eyes, the tears, the cries, instead of moving me, it inflamed me even more. "They're crying over idols," I'd tell the guys. "This proves we were right. They worshipped these stones more than the living God." I had become the enforcer of doctrinal purity, the avenger of the written word. Word got around town. Some supported us, others condemned us. The police even looked into us a few times, but they never had enough evidence. We were careful, always acting in the dead of night, always in isolated locations. My wife, Carla, began to express concern. "Andrew, this isn't right," she said. "This isn't how you win souls for Christ." But I didn't listen. I was blinded by certainty, deafened by conviction. Then our daughter was born. Helena arrived into the world on a December morning, small, perfect, with eyes that seemed to see directly into your soul. When I held her for the first time, I felt something different, a tenderness I didn't know, a need to protect that went beyond any religious conviction. Carla looked me in the eyes and said, "Promise you'll give her a better world than the one we're living in?" I promised, but I didn't know yet what that promise would mean. In the following months, with the care of a baby, my night walks became less frequent. But the fervor remained. I preached with the same intensity, perhaps even greater. After all, now I had a daughter to protect from the influences of the world. She would grow up in the purity of the true faith, far from the idols that deceived so many people. Helena was 2 years old when everything changed. It was a warm March afternoon, and I had decided to make one last visit before definitively ending the walks. The guys were growing up, some getting married, and I felt it might be time to focus solely on preaching. I chose a small chapel in the countryside, almost hidden among ancient oak trees. The door was ajar, and from inside emanated a sweet, almost childlike scent, like roses and burning incense. I went in alone this time. The hammer weighed in my right hand, familiar as an extension of my own arm. The chapel was small, with only 5 or 6 worn wooden pews. On the altar, a statue of the Virgin Mary, not very large, but sculpted with eye-catching detail. She held a child in her arms, and her eyes seemed to follow me as I approached. One more, I thought. One more soul will be freed today. I raised the hammer, aimed at the base of the statue, And that's when I heard a faint voice. "Pastor, please, wait." I turned and saw in the last pew, almost hidden in the shadows, an elderly woman with completely white hair. She must have been 70 years old, perhaps more. Her hands held a small, broken statue of the Virgin, which she protected against her chest as if it were a treasure. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you know this is idolatry. These images can't—" "I know what you think," she interrupted, and her voice, though weak, had a firmness that surprised me. "I know you believe you're doing good, but let me tell you a story before you break that image." Something in her voice made me lower the hammer. "Tell me," I said. "My name is Mary. I lived in a simple house by the river with my husband and youngest daughter. I had 5 children, but 4 had already left, built their own lives. Only Lucy still lived with us. She had Down syndrome, 17 years old, but a joy that lit up our home." Mary caressed the broken image in her hands. "I received this image from my mother, who received it from her mother. 3 generations in our family. It wasn't a matter of worship, Pastor. It was a matter of remembrance, of love, of history." "But ma'am—" "Let me finish," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. "3 years ago, there was a flood. The rain fell for 3 straight days. The river overflowed, and when we looked, the water was already entering the house. My husband managed to get out, but Lucy and I were trapped on the 2nd floor. The house was shaking, about to be swept away by the current." She paused, wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I was desperate, Pastor, desperate. I grabbed this image, the only thing I could reach, and I started to pray. I didn't pray to the image, I prayed to God. But I held this image as if it were an anchor, a reminder that God was with me. And then, the back wall of the house gave way. Lucy and I were swept away by the water. I couldn't swim well, Lucy couldn't swim at all. But I didn't let go of this image. I held on to it with one hand and my daughter with the other. Pastor, I swear on the name of Jesus that it's true. This image floated. It kept us afloat until help arrived." I looked at her in silence. "Ma'am, that's impossible. I know how it sounds, but I was there. I lived it. This image saved me, saved my daughter. Not because it has power of its own, but because God used it to save us. Just as he used a rod for Moses to part the sea, just as he used a stone for David to defeat Goliath." She stood up, approached me. "Pastor, do you have children?" "I have a daughter. She's still young." "Then you understand."
If someone came to your house and broke a picture of your daughter, how would you feel? The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. I imagined someone breaking a picture of Helena, and I felt a rage I didn't expect. "I'd be furious," I admitted. "Then you understand why it hurts so much when our images are broken. It's not worship, Pastor. It's love. It's remembrance. It's history." I was silent for a long time. Mary returned to her bench, holding her broken image again. "Do what you have to do," she said. "But now you know what this image means to me." I looked at the hammer in my hand, then at the image on the altar, then at the face of the woman who looked at me with eyes full of pain and forgiveness. And then, for the first time in years, I couldn't lift the hammer. "I'm sorry," I murmured, and left the chapel. Outside, the afternoon was ending. I got in the car and sat there for a long time, trying to understand what had happened to me. All my conviction, all my certainty had been shaken by the simple story of a woman who almost drowned clinging to an image. On the way home, I couldn't get her voice out of my head. "It's not worship, Pastor. It's love. It's remembrance. It's history." How much love had I broken? How many memories had I destroyed? How many stories had I erased with my hammer? I arrived home and found Carla playing with Helena in the backyard. Our daughter was 2 years old, learning to speak, and ran to me shouting, "Daddy!" I picked her up and, for the first time, I imagined someone destroying something she loved. The pain I felt was unbearable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in the living room with the Bible open on my lap, trying to find justifications for what I did. But all the passages I had always used to justify the breakages seemed different now. You shall have no other gods before me. But Mary wasn't worshiping the image. She was remembering God through it. That's when Helena appeared in the living room. She had recently started walking, and sometimes she woke up in the middle of the night. "Daddy," she said, hugging me, "can't you sleep?" "No, my daughter. Daddy is thinking." Thinking about what? How to explain to a 2-year-old the dilemmas that were consuming me? Daddy did some wrong things. He's trying to figure out how to fix them. Helena looked at me with those big eyes full of innocence. "Daddy, when I break something, Mommy says it's just a matter of gluing it back together." The simplicity of the answer struck me like lightning. Glue it back together. That's it. I needed to glue it back together. Not only the images I broke, but the hearts I hurt, the stories I destroyed, the faith I shattered. If you are watching this testimony and have been going through difficult times, subscribe to the channel to receive more stories like this. Sometimes the answer we seek comes from the most unexpected places. The following morning, I returned to the chapel alone. I brought glue, sandpaper, paint, everything I might need to restore the statue I'd threatened to destroy. Mary was there, as if she knew I'd be coming back. "I came to fix it," I told her. "Fix what, Pastor?" "Everything. Everything I broke. Everything I destroyed. Starting here." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. "Then, let's work together." We spent the entire morning restoring the statue. Each piece I glued felt like a piece of my heart being healed. Mary told me more about her life, her family, how her faith had been built through generations. I told her about my journey, my convictions, how lost I felt now. "Pastor," she said as we painted the final touches, "you're not lost. You're finding yourself. Just like I found myself clinging to this statue during the flood. But what about my preaching, my church? How do I explain this change?" "With truth, with love, with humility." When we finished, the statue was more beautiful than before. The cracks were still visible, but somehow they made it more human, more real. "Like people," Mary said, "we're all broken, but when we're mended with love, we become more beautiful." In the following months, my preaching changed completely. Instead of condemning, I began to embrace. Instead of breaking, I began to build. I spoke about love, tolerance, understanding, that faith can manifest in different ways. My congregation was divided. Some supported me. Others accused me of betraying the gospel. Pastor Elijah visited me a few times, concerned about my change of course. "Andrew, you're losing focus," he'd say. "The war against idolatry is our main mission." But I could no longer see war where there was love, nor idolatry where there was devotion. It was a difficult period. Some church members left, others arrived. I was literally rebuilding not only my faith, but my community. And Helena, my little Helena, was growing up watching all of this. She had a natural wisdom that impressed me. "Daddy," she'd say, "it's better to fix things than to break them, right?" One day, Peter, one of the guys who used to join me on night walks, showed up at my office. He was married now, expecting a child. "Pastor," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about what we used to do. I can no longer accept that it was right." We talked for hours about forgiveness, about change, about how our faith needs to grow and transform. "Do you repent?" he asked. "Every day," I replied. "But repentance without action is empty. I need to do something to make amends." That's when I started a project I called Restored Hearts. Along with some church members, we began visiting people who had been affected by our actions. We apologized, offered help to restore what had been broken, and sought to understand their stories. Not everyone welcomed us. Some still held resentment, and I understood them perfectly. But many opened their doors to us, shared their stories, and allowed us to participate in their healing journey. Each conversation was a lesson in humility. Each forgiveness received was an undeserved blessing. Helena grew up amidst all of this. She was 4 years old when she started accompanying me on some visits. Her presence had a special power to break down resistance and open hearts. "Daddy," she'd say after a particularly difficult visit, "why are people sad when they break their things?" "Because those things have sentimental value, my daughter. They represent love, memories, history. So when it breaks, it also breaks the heart?" "Sometimes, yes. That's why you're fixing things. That's why I'm fixing things." 2 years after that encounter with Mary, I was in the church basement organizing some old materials when I found the hammer. It was under a dusty tarp, forgotten like a weapon of war after an armistice. I picked it up and felt a weight that wasn't just physical.
All the statues I'd broken, all the hearts I'd hurt, all the pain I'd caused, it was all there, etched into the worn wood. "Christ alone," it was written on the side. And suddenly, I understood that I had been right all along, but in a completely different way. Christ alone, not as a hammer to break, but as love to heal. Christ alone, not as condemnation, but as mercy. Christ alone, not as division, but as unity. At that moment, I made a decision. I raised the hammer high and smashed it against the concrete floor. The pieces scattered across the basement, and I felt as if I were breaking not just a tool, but an old part of myself. Helena came down the stairs at that moment. "Daddy, what was that noise?" "Nothing much, my daughter. Daddy just broke something that needed to be broken." She looked at the pieces of the hammer scattered on the floor. "Are you going to glue it back together?" "No, not this time. Some things need to stay broken so we can build something better." "But the story doesn't end there. Remember the beginning? When I told you that Helena appeared in my room at 3 in the morning with a statue of the Virgin Mary? That happened last week, 3 years after I broke the hammer. She walked into the room holding a small statue I was sure I had destroyed years before. It was identical to the one Mary held that afternoon in the chapel, but it was perfect, intact, as if it had never been touched. "Daddy," she said, "I dreamed of a lady who told me to give this to you." My heart almost stopped. "What was this lady like, Helena?" "She had white hair, kind eyes, and she said you would understand." Mary had passed away 6 months earlier. I had conducted the funeral, prayed for her family, and mourned her passing. How could Helena have dreamed of her? How could this statue be there, intact? I held the image in my hands and felt a peace I'd never known before. It wasn't a miracle in the supernatural sense, or maybe it was. It was a miracle in that it represented everything I had learned, that faith doesn't manifest in only one way, that love can use any channel to express itself, that God can speak through any symbol when the heart is open. "Daddy," she said, "you said this is for you to remember." "Remember what?" "That fixing is better than breaking, that loving is better than judging, that together is better than separate." Today, that image sits on my desk at the church, not as an object of worship, but as a reminder of what I learned. My preaching changed completely. I speak about love, about tolerance, about understanding that faith has many faces. My congregation grew, not just in number, but in diversity. We have Catholics who visit our services, evangelicals who respect other denominations, people of different faiths who find in our church a place of welcome. The Restored Hearts Project continues. We visited over 200 families, participated in the restoration of dozens of images, and heard hundreds of stories. Each one teaches me something new about faith, about love, about humanity. Peter is now a pastor at a church in a neighboring town. He preaches the same gospel of love that I learned that afternoon in the chapel. Lucas became an artist, specializing in restoring sacred images. Matthew became a social worker, dedicating his life to restoring broken lives. Helena is 6 now,
and sometimes accompanies me on project visits. She has a special ability to understand people, to offer a smile that heals, a hug that consoles. "Daddy," she told me the other day, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." Like me how, my daughter? I want to help fix what's broken. Carla fully supports me on this journey. She always knew something was wrong with my old approach, but respected my process of discovery. "I married a man who broke things," she said recently, "but I fell in love with the man who fixes them." I won't lie, I still face criticism. There are still people who believe my change was a deviation, a betrayal of evangelical principles. But I've learned that true faith doesn't fear questioning, isn't shaken by diversity, and doesn't find strength in condemning what's different. Today, looking back, I see that my entire journey was necessary. I needed to break to learn how to fix. I needed to hurt to learn how to heal. I needed to condemn to learn how to forgive. I needed to be uncompromising to learn how to be tolerant. The image Helena brought me is still here with me. Sometimes, when no one is looking, I light a candle before it. Not because it has power, but because it represents everything I've learned about faith, about love, about humanity. It reminds me that God can use anything to teach us, anyone to transform us, any situation to make us grow. "Daddy," she said, "you said this is for you to remember." Remember what? That fixing is better than breaking, that loving is better than judging, that together is better than separate. Today, that image sits on my desk at the church, not as an object of worship, but as a reminder of what I learned. My preaching changed completely. I speak about love, about tolerance, about understanding that faith has many faces. My congregation grew, not just in number, but in diversity. We have Catholics who visit our services, evangelicals who respect other denominations, people of different faiths who find in our church a place of welcome. The Restored Hearts Project continues. We visited over 200 families, participated in the restoration of dozens of images, and heard hundreds of stories. Each one teaches me something new about faith, about love, about humanity. Peter is now a pastor at a church in a neighboring town. He preaches the same gospel of love that I learned that afternoon in the chapel. Lucas became an artist, specializing in restoring sacred images. Matthew became a social worker, dedicating his life to restoring broken lives. Helena is 6 now, and sometimes accompanies me on project visits. She has a special ability to understand people, to offer a smile that heals, a hug that consoles. "Daddy," she told me the other day, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." Like me how, my daughter? I want to help fix what's broken. Carla fully supports me on this journey. She always knew something was wrong with my old approach, but respected my process of discovery. "I married a man who broke things," she said recently, "but I fell in love with the man who fixes them." I won't lie, I still face criticism. There are still people who believe my change was a deviation, a betrayal of evangelical principles. But I've learned that true faith doesn't fear questioning, isn't shaken by diversity, and doesn't find strength in condemning what's different. Today, looking back, I see that my entire journey was necessary. I needed to break to learn how to fix. I needed to hurt to learn how to heal. I needed to condemn to learn how to forgive. I needed to be uncompromising to learn how to be tolerant. The image Helena brought me is still here with me. Sometimes, when no one is looking, I light a candle before it. Not because it has power, but because it represents everything I've learned about faith, about love, about humanity. It reminds me that God can use anything to teach us, anyone to transform us, any situation to make us grow. If you've come this far in this testimony, you're probably going through a time of questioning, of doubt, of transformation. I want you to know that it's okay, that questioning isn't a lack of faith, it's a sign of maturity. That changing isn't weakness, it's courage. That acknowledging mistakes isn't defeat, it's victory. Today, I know that true faith doesn't need hammers to strengthen itself. It strengthens itself in love, in understanding, and in the ability to see God everywhere and in everyone. It strengthens when we acknowledge that we don't have a monopoly on the truth, that we are not the only bearers of the divine word. The hammer I wielded for so many years was actually a tool of fear. Fear that my faith wasn't strong enough, fear that other religious expressions would diminish my own belief, fear that God wasn't big enough to manifest in different ways. But God is bigger than our fears. He is bigger than our limitations. He is bigger than our need to always be right. And sometimes He uses an elderly lady in a forgotten chapel to teach us that true faith doesn't destroy. It builds. It doesn't divide. It unites. It doesn't condemn. It loves. The image Helena brought me remains here, in my office, reminding me every day that my journey isn't over, that there are still hearts to mend, stories to hear, love to share, that true faith isn't a destination, but a path we travel not with hammers, but with open hands, ready to embrace, to heal, to build. And if you're broken today, if you're lost, if you're questioning everything you believed in, know that you're in the right place. Because it's in brokenness that we discover our true strength. It's in doubt that we find our deepest faith. It's in questioning that we arrive at the answers that truly matter. After all, what matters isn't the shape of the image, but the shards of tenderness we gather in each act of compassion. What matters isn't absolute certainty, but the humility to acknowledge that we are still learning. What matters isn't the hammer that destroys, but the hands that build, that embrace, that heal. This is my story. This is my transformation. This is my faith.